Hello everyone, good afternoon, and welcome to our workshop, DAPC workshop at Data Week 2022. I will share my screen to give you a brief introduction of this workshop. Okay, so again, welcome to this session. This session is about data privacy, better control your personal data with new open source solution. My name is Najma. I am a senior researcher and project leader at Fraunhofer IAIS. Fraunhofer IAIS is one of the applied research institute in Germany, and our competencies are artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data, and also data interoperability and portability. So what's this workshop is about? As you know, GDPR came into force since 2018, and the right to data portability was considered one of the most important novelties within the GDPR. And in order to give the power of personal data back to the people's hand, tools and new services should be developed. And this is basically the idea of data and service portability. This ensures that at least the privacy of the end users. What is DAPC? DAPC is a European Union project that fosters the advanced research in the data portability field through the support to researchers, SMEs, and startups, or innovators, providing equity-free funding and a pack of services such as coaching and mentoring in the required area. And this will pave them the way to successfully reach the market with their use case. In this session, we have a few winners of our DAPC program, and they are experts and innovators in the field. And we will discuss how these open source solutions that our innovators and our winners developed during DAPC program, they ensure data privacy from the portability perspective. So the agenda, we will have 6 speeches from our DAPC project, while Aaron, Marilyn, Nicola, Michael, Mehdi, and Felix. So more or less each project will have around 5 to 7 minutes. In case you have any questions, just write in the chat and we can ask the presenter during their session. And at 5 p.m. we will have a roundtable. In this roundtable, we will discuss 3 topics that connects data privacy and open source solution together. The first topic is that, in the recent years after GDPR and data portability topic, this new governance model was proposed as a solution. And we will discuss here in this roundtable that from our experts and innovators perspective, how this open source project can help to move toward this new governance model. The second topic is about the challenges of developing common and interoperable data formats. And in this topic, we will ask our experts, in your opinion, what are the challenges that may arise in developing a common format for different services. And the third topic is about the business model. And we will discuss that how can open source project help to define more transparent business model. Especially this model should make citizen informed choice, should make citizen inform about their choices of how their data is being used. In the roundtable speaker are the same speaker of our pitches, but we will have Vivi and Zoltan, Vivi from My Data and also Zoltan from University of Amsterdam joining in this roundtable with us. And yeah, I think you know that the webinar is being recorded. And as I said, if you have any question, just write in the chat and we will try to answer your question during the session. Thank you. Having said that, I will give the floor to the first speaker.
Okay, so I believe I am first. Do you hear me?
Yes.
And see my screen? Okay, so my name is Aaron McSween, and I'm here representing the CryptPad team. As you can see on my screen, this is how you spell the name of the project, CryptPad. And if you go to cryptpad.org, I'm just showing our project website because it has all the information you need to know. But basically, the idea, our main pitch is right here. CryptPad is a collaborative office suite that is end-to-end encrypted and open source. So most people that are attending this, I think, would be quite familiar with office suites. You have Google Docs, you have Office 365, and a variety of other ones. Some are open source, some are proprietary. Very few of them are end-to-end encrypted. So we're trying to provide an alternative to these platforms, which gives all of the benefits of online collaboration, being able to share documents and edit them together in real time, but to deliver on the promise of privacy. So a lot of these projects, they say that they care about your data, they care about your privacy, but if you really dig into how their projects work, they don't really follow through on that. So we're just trying to do better. We offer code editor, document editor, forms, Kanban for project management, slide, like a presentation, two kinds of presentations, one that's based off of text and one that is the more conventional, like PowerPoint format. Rich text, like a basic web-based HTML editor, spreadsheets, and whiteboard. So we offer quite a few things we've added to this repertoire over the years, and they're all end-to-end encrypted, and the entire platform is open source. So anybody can install it on their own computer, on their own server, and host it for themselves, for their company, for their community, whatever they need. Right now, there's, I think, around 700 private instances in addition to our own, which is available at cryptpad.fr. You can go to our website and click this link, and there's a directory of public instances, so people that are willing to share their computing resources for anybody who wants to use it. You can host your documents with them, or you can host it with us, and we offer premium plans for hosting. But really, we try to operate as a public resource first, and then our business offerings are a way to sustain that public resource, because we think that privacy should be available for everybody and not just people who have disposable income. And for the DAPC project, what we did is we looked at a few of our editors, and some of them use already open formats, but some of them didn't offer the ability to export your data in like a very usable way. So in particular, if you look at spreadsheets, Word-like documents, and PowerPoint-like documents, what every other platform does is when you want to export your document from their platform, they do the conversion to whatever format you want on their server. So if you've been editing a Word-like document, they can see all the content, and that's why they're able to change it between different formats. There are some end-to-end encrypted platforms, supposedly end-to-end encrypted platforms, but what they do is they send data to their server. They send the encrypted data, the decrypted data to their server, convert it, and send you back the converted document. And their promise is that they delete that data immediately after they've finished using it, but there's no guarantee of that. So for our project, we developed converters that run in the browser itself, which nobody else had done before that. It uses a technology called Webassembly, which is fairly new, so it only operates in some browsers. Safari, up until recently, didn't support it. But what it means is that the the document never leaves your device in an unencrypted format, and so we offer the ability to export your data and to interoperate with other services through these common formats, but we do it in a privacy-preserving way, which until recently that was not possible. So I think that's about it for what we did for this project. It was a lot of work. It doesn't sound like much, but there was a lot of work that went into that. So maybe I'll end now, and if there are any questions, I can answer them.
Thanks a lot, Aaron. I don't see any question here in the chat, but let me also just check the live stream.
Alternatively, if I end early, then other people can go a little over time.
Yes.
Usually
No, I don't see any. No questions. Okay. So let's move to Marilyn then.
All right, thank you, everyone. So I'm going to present about Memolessa, which is a free and open source mobile experience. And what does that mean? Well, it means that we are basically making a mobile phone and tablet operating system to compete with the likes of Android and Apple. Android and iOS specifically, which is a pretty tough goal. But we are completely open source. It's a community-driven effort, and we're trying to bring a mobile operating system to the market. And what we want is we want it to be free of commercial interests, and we don't want users to pay with their data or their privacy, which is not quite true for the current devices, right? You have to go through a lot of hoops if you're using Android to get anywhere near a device that doesn't share your location all the time or a lot of information with other companies. And all our sources is online, so everyone is free to inspect or help out and fix problems, basically. So the main problem that we're trying to tackle is the duopoly. So you might know the term monopoly, which is one party controls most of the markets. But in this case, Apple and Google together control 99.9% of all the new sales of smartphones, which effectively makes them a duopoly. And that has many problems. First of all, they have very strict control over their devices, and by extension, they have strict control over the users of their devices, because that's how they designed the system. And it also means that they could potentially collaborate secretly to have anti-competitive measures against other players in the markets, right? They have a lot of interest to stay big and not have other parties compete. And the same control they exert over their devices also applies to companies making apps for their devices. There's been quite a lot of cases now where companies aren't quite happy with the way they've been, Apple and Google have handled cases where they want their app to do other things, or they want to do all their own in-app purchases, and they take a huge cut, and they have nowhere to go, so they start a lawsuit. And the world is waking up. The European Union is, I think this year they have a record fine for Google of 4-point-something billion euros in antitrust cases, because they were using search to promote their own products. And like I said, for privacy, this is also not a good thing, right? So that's what we're trying to tackle. So again, we're trying to be community-driven, free, open source, and we try to stick with all the open standards that are available out there, as opposed to corporate-driven with proprietary apps and whatever lock-in you can think of, basically. So our system runs on Linux. It's based on the Debian Linux distribution, and we are just adding packages of our own to the system to make it into a mobile operating system. And we are supporting a couple of phones only currently, but we're looking at extending support of the phones. And we are trying to do that by inviting other people to join and do all of that. So we are, sorry. Yes, so we're currently supporting a couple of devices, but we're hoping to support that, increase that soon, and DAPC also helped with that some. So the main things that we worked on for the DAPC project was the communication of our platform. So we extended and built support for various communications like XMPP, Matrix, IRC, and also, funny enough, SMSs, because we weren't able to send SMSs yet. And we also built a UI for that, so that users can actually write messages and receive them. Another thing that we worked on to increase the privacy and security of our operating system is we integrated WireGuard and Tor. So now the system has a mode where you can just use Tor, and all your communication will go over Tor, making sure that people cannot easily sniff on your communication. And the system even has the ability to update all of its packages entirely over Tor, which I think is kind of cool. And then we also made it possible to select using specific WireGuard or Tor connections for specific Wi-Fi connections or other things like that. And we also added OpenVPN support. So DAPC really helped us with that, and it was a lot of work. Our next goals are to work on recycling. So we hope to start supporting more devices and help people recycle their old devices so that they can run a free and open source, privacy respecting operating system on their phone. We've been reaching out to some people. The devices that we support are some of them are pretty old. One of them in particular is from 2012, and they still show up a lot. So we're trying to find a palette of them so that we can distribute them to other people. We also hope to start a crowdfunding effort later this year to provide more support for more devices and add more privacy features to our operating system, as well as some other core features that we think we still want to add. And we might also consider making our own mobile phone, but that's probably quite hard. So we might not do that, but we would do another crowdfunding for that. The first one is successful. So again, we want to look into recycling, improve the core operating system some more, and then look into a crowdfunding campaign. The team of people who work on this is quite small, but the list here is quite small, but there's quite some people who work on it. But I'm Merlin, as I said before. Ivan has done a lot of work. Ivaila, Sandra, and Carl have also done a lot of work, and there's a lot more people. I think 400 or 500 people that follow us around and help out. So it's kind of cool. Some of our partners, the Pine 64, they're making a phone that's really cool. You should check it out. The Pine phone, the Internet Archive has provided a lot of hosting and help. NLNet has funded our efforts in the past, as has DAPC, which is the NGI. Dyn.org has built the distribution that we base our phone on, and which is that one. Thank you, everyone. I'll take any questions now.
Thanks, Merlin. Well, I have a question. How easy you think that this operating system is for a regular end user to use it without any computer background?
I think currently it's quite hard to do. And okay. we're working very much on making it better. And we're collaborating with someone to sell some of the phones to end users and see, if you just give them the phone, can they actually use it, and what problems do they run into? Yeah,
I see. I mean, at the end, it's like what it's very important is that to have end users, right? Like regular end users, and like to move forward, to move from these big competitors. But very nice project, thank you, and very nice presentation on the slides. So next one is Nicola.
Yes, I'm going to share my screen. So, hi everyone. My name is Nikolai Palati. I'm the CEO of Interoperable. And Interoperable is about providing confidential data sharing and analytics. So data collaboration between businesses is hard today. On one hand, you have the data controllers, those that have the data, and they know it's valuable. They have this feeling that it must be very valuable, and let's analyze it. On the other hand, you have the data analysts or the organizations, the companies that have the expertise, the skills to analyze data, and they have some proprietary algorithms. And today there's this barrier between the two because data sharing is difficult. So the data controllers don't want to hand over the data. The data analysts don't want to hand over their proprietary tools, their proprietary algorithms to do so. So the real problem is that sharing data is difficult due to fear. There's a lot of fear and misunderstanding. There are regulations, of course, and business constraints. Companies are not willing to disclose their data and algorithms, and there's no straightforward way to collaborate in a compliant and trustworthy way without either handing over the data or the algorithms. So the traditional solutions that we see today, and I'm talking primarily about the business world, but it's the same in the business to consumer. So it's either blind trust, all of those terms and conditions that we as users just click through, or there are these complex and lengthy legal negotiations between businesses, which are time consuming, very draining, financially draining, or in many cases, nothing happens. The organizations just cannot find a good way to collaborate with their data assets. And so our solution, what we're building with Kennerbit, is a confidential hardware protected data sharing service, which would allow organizations to collaborate while keeping control over their digital assets, over data, code, and so on. And also where they would be able to build trust based on hardware provided security guarantees. So instead of trusting brand names of large cloud providers, they would reduce this trust base to just the hardware that they're using. And also math and cryptography. And also the goal of this, let's say, infrastructure project is to reduce time to data, so that whenever two parties agree to collaborate and let's say, collaborate with data and so on, data scientists should be able to get their hands on data as soon as possible, not just sit there rolling their thumbs, waiting for the lawyers to agree. And how we do this is that we are focusing on a missing piece, or a piece that has so far been missing when it comes to data protection. So we know very well as an industry how to protect data at rest. We know how to protect data in transit. So the emergence of SSL in the 90s, which later now is known as TLS, enabled anything from e-commerce to secure banking and everything else. And now we have the missing part coming up, and this is like protection of data in use. So data is also protected when it is being processed on the computing hardware. On a very high level, how this looks like, what we provide is infrastructure to set up a confidential collaboration environment where the collaborating parties can deploy their workloads, and on the other hand, deploy the data for processing. And as a result, they get an attestation report with detailed, let's say, security properties of the environment, down to the firmware of the platform where this is processed. They also get, of course, the result of the computation, and in this way, this enables collaboration. And of course, the best of this is that they don't have to trust us. We just make this work, make it easy to use. But fundamentally, this is just about using functionality in commodity server platforms. So why is now the right time for this? So first of all, we see an increasing awareness about the value of data. As I mentioned, everybody has this warm, fuzzy feeling that data is valuable, but they don't really know how valuable it is. And hence, many organizations are thinking about data monetization opportunities. They know they have been collecting data maybe for decades, and like this data might be worth something. In the same time, there are new regulations about data protection, which luckily prevent careless use of data, but not always. There's, on the other hand, fierce competition for access to data sets. We've seen a lot of hype around machine learning and AI, but this all doesn't work without data. And no matter how mature or good the machine learning tool sets are, they still need data to be actually useful. And last but not least, we see widespread hardware support for confidential computing, and we see ongoing advancements in privacy enhancement technologies. We have been working with this since more than a year, and the DAPSI project has been a real boon for this and helped us validate this with many companies. We've validated this across several industries. anything from manufacturing and process analytics, machine learning, of course, image processing, satellite image processing, financial data, as well as other new types such as threat intelligence exchange and financial fraud prevention. So the markets that we really see in demand are those that benefit and that can create let's say, better results through data collaboration and data sharing. And this can be, as I said, threat intelligence exchange, healthcare, drug discovery, and many others. The team behind this, we have the two founders, me and my co-founder Stefano, and we have a team of engineers and a very good board that is helping us to drive this forward and position it in the right way. So the purpose of this is to enable businesses to share data, collaborate, and most importantly, hold on to their intellectual property and not just give away data as it often happens today. Thank you for your attention, and I will gladly take your questions.
Thanks a lot, Nicola. Let's wait if we have any questions. Have you already had some companies reaching you?
Yes, we have had quite a few companies reaching out. It's what we see right now. There's a very strong will to do this. There's a strong need. We notice two things, though. First of all, there's also a lot of, as I said, a lot of fear. It's like companies don't know how this should work and so on, what they are allowed to do with data, what they are not. And also those that do decide to go on realize that actually they have often, let's say, poor data governance. And we realized that we need to talk primarily to companies that have good data governance, where they know what data can be used for what purposes. Because in many cases, responsibility for data within the company is very messy, and data governance is very, very important, as well as data quality, because many companies think they have valuable data, but unfortunately, a lot of that is often poor quality. So that prevents it. But I really believe we've hit the right spot, and we're also very involved with the open infrastructure community and other cloud providers. So we see a good uptake in this.
Great. Yeah, this governance that you just mentioned, it will be also one of our topic in the roundtable. Thanks a lot. Very nice presentation and the slides. Let's move on to the next one. Yes, I see you, Mikhail. You can start your presentation.
Right. So I'm Mikhail from SensorTrend. I live with type 1 diabetes myself. It means that my body no longer produces insulin hormone. Rather, I must inject it with an external device. If I don't get any insulin, I'll be in coma in 24 hours. I'll be dead in 2 days. If I inject too much insulin, I might drop dead in just a few moments. To learn how much insulin my body requires in any given situation, I must constantly measure my blood glucose, estimate the carbohydrates in everything I eat and drink, pay attention to physical activity, changes in weight, and other parameters. And I need to learn from this data. Today, many wellness trackers make it easy or even fun to gather the data, but learning from it remains a challenge. And this is where SensorTrend helps. We integrate with dozens of medical devices and wellness trackers, and we bring data together from those devices and derive actionable insights out of that. And we also facilitate sharing that data with healthcare professionals and peers. And that was a long way of saying that, yes, we do patient-centric diabetes remote monitoring. Just wanted you to know what it means to me and why it matters to me and to the rest of the core team, most of whom have really close relationship with type 1 diabetes. There are tens of thousands of diabetes apps available in app stores. How are we different? First of all, we are not a diary app where you need to enter data manually or copy it from place to another. In fact, our key value proposition is that if the data exists somewhere, we fetch it from there automatically. However, we go even further. I think what really sets us apart from all the rest is that we don't store any health or wellness data in our own service. Rather, we fetch it from where it exists on demand. And why? There are two reasons. First one is an ideological one. We want people with diabetes to have a choice. We see that if such platforms would emerge, that would give rise to an ecosystem of apps where many apps can store and analyze data stored by other apps. And patients would have choice to choose just the apps and devices that best suit their individual needs. The second reason for not storing any health or wellness data in our own service is a business rationale. We see that the world is changing. Previously, having big amounts of personal data, and especially health data, stored within your service was an asset, but not anymore. Since GDPR, HIPAA, and other similar legislation, we think that having personal data stored in your system is no longer an asset, it's a liability. And in this new era, the asset is actually the permission to use data for a specific purpose. And we really value that asset. And to get that asset, we do what's best for the patient's from the patient's perspective. And we want to be really transparent about it. And that includes not hoarding maximum amount of data into our own service. We want to be one of many shining beacons showing the way towards a fair data ecosystem. If any of what I talked about resonates with you, please keep us in mind and help us spread the word and the gospel. Connect with us on our social media and use us as an example when you are discussing the future of fair data ecosystems. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I don't know if Mehdi is here. I think the next one is here. Mehdi, can you hear me? I see you in the list, but we cannot hear.
He's reconnecting.
I'm here, but I have Wi-Fi connection. I just wanted to restart if we have still time. Can someone go?
Yes. If you're ready, then let's start with Felix.
Okay, let me share my screen. All right, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, hi everyone. So my name is Felix and I am a developer working at Visions. I'm representing the rulebook team for the DAPSI project, and I will share a short demo of what the work we did enables today. So Visions is a contract and consent management tool for the exchange of personal data. Contracts are built to represent an authorization between two organizations for sharing types of data over a specific purpose and use case. Sorry. Can we hear me well? Yeah.
Yes, please.
Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, contracts are built for sharing data over really specific data in a specific use case, and consents are given by the end user to then enable his personal data to be shared between these two organizations. So what I'll show here is I have two temporary demonstration platforms that we built just for demo purposes. The first one here is FunMOOC, which is a platform proposing different courses that I can follow to get access to different skills. And now if I place myself as the end user, I would like to be able to transfer the skills I got from following these courses over to another platform, such as Indeed, which will help me find a job based on my skills. So Visions offers an API for platforms to be able to show actions to their users, such as this one here, offering me to export my data over to Indeed to find a job. Now, if I click here right now, it'll tell me it can't work right now, and this is the intended purpose for the demo, because basically the contract between FunMOOC and Indeed here for sharing data is non-existent or has not been signed by the two parties. To be able to generate a contract, we have a platform called Visions Trust, where organizations have an account to be able to manage a certain amount of information. I'll log in here to the one that is represented by Indeed in my demonstration. And so the information that can be declared is some like the types of data that the platform has and that the platform can share with other organizations. So sorry, everything is in French here, but I'll do the translations. Here's an example. As Indeed, I have declared that I have data of my users, such as their names, their skills, the spoken languages, and stuff like that. And the other thing that I can declare as an organization is purposes, use case, what I am going to, well, basically why I am going to use potentially other people's data, other organizations' data. And here I have declared something like finding a job, which is one purpose that I'm going to use in this demo. And the reason for why we allowed these declarations is because contracts are based on, again, the use of data for specific purposes. So as a platform going to use data from FunMOOC, FunMOOC is going to export data towards me. I need to ask FunMOOC, and I'll be doing this right now. I need to ask FunMOOC if I can use their data for basically the purpose that I have declared, which is finding a job. So here are what is called test data provider here is just our internal demonstration name for what is represented by the FunMOOC platform I showed before. And I can visualize some data that they have and purposes that they have. And I can also make a request of data that they have. So here we see that I requested the data of diplomas, skills, and spoken languages for one of my purpose, which is finding a job. This sends a request to the organization FunMOOC for me to be able to use this data. So if I quickly log out of this account and go to the provider FunMOOC's account, I have received a request from Indeed to use my diploma, skills, and spoken language for the purpose finding a job. On this interface, I can individually say yes or no to the use of this data. And when I validate, this generates a contract. There's a lot here that have been revoked just because we have done demos before, but it generates a contract which states the different information about the two parties, as well as the exchange and conditions. So the purpose, finding a job, the data types that will be that can be shared, and the conditions that apply to this specific exchange. Now, in order for this contract to be activated and valid, it needs to be signed by both parties. So right now we use MetaMask to be able to sign and then upload the signature to the blockchain. And so if I do this right now, I sign here, and then I log out and go to my other platform, which is Indeed, and go see my contracts because I have the exact same contract as the other platform. Sign this as well. And now that the contract is validated, if I go back here and the same thing as before, I am the user, I want to share my data. Now I can, now the platform can show me basically a consent pop-up resuming what is going to happen with this exchange. So it states that it is for me to find a job, that the data is going to leave FunMOOC and go to Indeed. And as the user, I can select which one of the data that I want to share to Indeed. So here I click around, say yes or no, and export my data. And this activates the consent protocol where Visions is going to generate a consent and then call the appropriate APIs from FunMOOC and Indeed to share the data. And just to show here an example of results, if this is our demonstration platform for Indeed, we have the completely arbitrary data that I just sent over of my diplomas, my skills, and my spoken languages. Last thing I want to specify is that during this protocol, Visions does not have any access to the actual value of the data that is being exchanged. We use the data types that are shown in the consent pop-up and that are declared by the organizations, and the consent is based on these data types, but we do not know exactly or touch or view or anything the actual data of the user. So yeah, this rounds up my presentation. I see you speaking, Najma, but
okay, yes, sorry. Thank you. So did also organization reach out for your service, or how
Yes.
many? Okay, and did they have a problem or something?
Actually, we have already some organization using our platform. Today, they are mainly actors of the education sector in France, edtechs and universities, and we have had students try our tools to be able to share data between these platforms to generate orientation reports and such. So yes, we do have some users right now.
Great. Well, good luck for your future work. Very nice and interesting. So the last one would be Mehdi. Hopefully you are now have a stable connection.
Yes, I'm coming.
Mm-hmm.
Should be fine. Yeah, are you able to share my screen, to see my screen yet? No?
Not yet. Okay, now it seems that it's working. Yes, in the edit mode.
Yeah, you see it?
Yes, in the edit mode, not presentation mode.
Okay, presentation mode should work like that,
Yes.
right?
Yes, correct.
So yeah, thank you very much. I'll try to be quick. Thank you for understanding that my Wi-Fi was not great, so I passed the end. Yeah, so at Alias we were in the DAPC, I think cohort 1, really working on gathering. Helping people to gather data from portability requests, but we did a research for 1 year and we found that the main issues where people were not getting their data is because the company were not able to know where was the data, what was where was the data, how to access it, how to give it in a machinable way, like and on purpose. Like, of course, the big tech giants could claim that they were not be able to do it. We don't trust, but most of the companies we've worked with, like almost 700, said actually we don't know how to do it. So please build a tool to help us doing that. And we've decided to build these tools. So again, you know, the main problem that again, for people to be able to get back their data, the company needs to know where it is. And so like this, people will be able to really own it and really share it, make it portable from one company to another. But as long as the company doesn't deliver this data, it will never happen. And so we decided to give the tools to make portability happen. And so this is why as you may know, every company needs to be sure to know how they collect the data, how they process the data. And they need to track everything in real time from all the IT system of the company. That's millions or billions of events per day about data collection, you know, and about data processing in hundreds of IT systems. And currently, the main thing that breached the law and the code is a wonderful tool that everybody know. It's Excel. Like 98 companies work on Excel files to actually track what we call the record of processing activities, to know exactly on what type of user who signed up at this time, from this cohort, from this country. This is the data we should have on him. This is how the data is stored, and this is how we have to give it back. You understand that it's not possible, and nobody can follow that. No organization can track such complexity with such with a tool that is not, let's say, IT friendly, at least developer friendly, at least not connected with the IT system. And again, no company today is really able to know exactly where is the data and for what purpose it's used. So at Elias, we developed technology during the DAPC program, which we call data protection directly into your code without the need of legal knowledge, because the legal knowledge is inside directly the code and being able to be applied directly. It consists of 3 steps. The first one is make the record of processing activity machine readable. That's the first thing. Stop using Excel, have something that software can talk to and interact with as a single source of truth. So we transformed all the law of the GDPR, the CCPA, all the law, the 60 laws that we know on data protection. We put it in an engine that transformed it into code. And so we're glad to present an open source project that we run. That's the step 1, which is Europa for Universal Record of Processing Activities. So Europa is a format to describe your processing activities in a way that will be able to interact with other applications. So like this, you can really automate and stop the manual work. So that's the step 1. The step 2 is about tracking the legal events with sensors in the IT system. So like this, like just an example in the retail website, we, as a user, you generate a lot of actions. That these actions are in the IT system, they're events, right? So sign up, give consent to your newsletter, search, buy, whatever, provide the data. It's an event that should occur. For each of these events, you have actually a GDPR rule. For many of these, you have a GDPR rule that's to be applied. You need to store the data in a specific way for a specific time. You need to move the data from a system to another. You need to erase the data. You need to put it in archive. So there are many, many rules that, of course, nobody knows unless like there is a lawyer behind everything. So what we build an engine that enables to track every events in the system. I'm talking about events in the IT system, not tracking users, but events in the system, right? That are where the law will be called at every time an event occurs to know what's the rule that needs to be applied. Again, you can go on our Alias repository. All our components are open source. We have an hosted version, but all our components are open source, so you can know exactly what you have to do. Currently, we're doing a roadmap for putting sensors not only in the people system, but also in all the SaaS they use on the marketing aspect or on the data stack, data storage aspect. So like this, a company will be able to have a 360 view of a user. And so when a user is asking his data, we just see where are the sensors, where the users have been interacting, and we're able to give them really all their data in an automated way because it's connected to the Europa format that describes what are the processing activities and what actually is in the system, right? For what purpose. Last but not least, step 3, the last one, for where we didn't put sensors because sometimes we don't have time or we don't have sensors for everything. We have a data automate a PII discovery tool that enables to know, like, if we miss some personal data of a user, to give it back so the user can really own this data back. It's called Is This PII, and you can go on isthispii.com to try. It's open source. You can go on GitHub and fork it. It's a tool. I don't have to do a demo here, but it's a tool where you can put text or files, and it tracks if there is PII inside, so you can use it. It's based on the PERT model and many natural language processing models, to know exactly if there is some PII and to know if it's specific document, Slack, Discord, Gmail attachment file, if there is PII of a user, so you should give it back to a user. So step 1, making the record of processing activity machine readable. Step 2, put sensors to listen what's happening, to know what are the GDPR rules you need to apply and when you need to give data to a user when he asks. And the last one is when you didn't put sensor yet, you can still try to discover PII on the fly to be able to give it back to the data to user. These elements are open source. You can go on our repository to discover. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mahdi. Very nice, interesting. I have a question. Once you check in your system that something is not compliant with the rules that you implemented, is it like some warning, or it's like you prevent the the actions? How?
I didn't show you. I should have. You're right. But if you go on our website, you can see an example. When there is an action that needs to be made, the engine gives the action in a machine readable directly in a machine readable format for developers to be able to first understand, because developers don't understand the law because they did not study it, right? The second thing, so it's a machine readable explanation of what you need to do. Move from there to there, erase, archive, put a countdown, whatever. When there is an inconsistency or an incoherence, now it's not an instruction, it's an alert, a notification like, look, we've seen an email here. It's incoherent with the purpose that's described in the Europa framework. It has to escalate to the right person, the VP engineer, the privacy engineer, or the data protection officer. But it's also a way to see if instructions have been well done or not. So yeah, instructions when everything is good, alerts when something is probably wrong.
And once something changes in the regulation, you have to apply it manually, right?
So you apply it in your Europa standard. You apply in your Europa standard, and because it's a single source of truth connected to all the sensors and to all the applications, then, for example, just imagine in Germany, it was 3 years to store data of a user with consent. Now it's 2 years. The Europa is connected to all the application and sensors and say, look, put the countdown, not to 3 years, but 2 years for all these users who have Germany as the main residential country. And so like this, you can really apply as a cohort all the rules and not doing manual.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. So I think we are done with the pitches. Then let's move to our next part, which is a roundtable. I'm going to share again the screen. And I will also would like to ask every speaker of the roundtable to turn on their camera. Zoltan is not here yet, maybe because formally the session would have started at 5 p.m., but it's okay, so we can start. Let me share my screen. Okay, you see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I would like first, I know that, well, you had your pitches, but it would be nice if everyone introduced themselves very briefly, just a few sentences again before we start the roundtable. So let's start. Aaron, please turn on your camera and introduce yourself very briefly.
Okay, I think my camera is working. So I'm Aaron McSween. I'm the project lead of the CryptPad project, which is an end-to-end encrypted collaborative editor, which is fully open source.
Great, thank you. Merlin, could you please also say a few words about yourself?
Sure, yeah, so I'm Merlin Weyer, or Merlin in English form. I've been presenting just now the Memo Lester project, which is a open source and free software mobile smartphone operating system that we're working on. And the rest of my time, I typically spend working for the Internet Archive. Great,
thank you. Nicola.
Hi again, my name is Nicola Palade. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Interoperable, working on secure data sharing infrastructure. And my background is, let's say, academic research in cloud security.
Thank you. So, Mikael.
Yes, Mikael Rinnemäki. And SensoTrend is the startup that makes life with diabetes easier. And DDAPOSC is the diabetes data portability through open source components, and that is our DAPSI project.
Thank you. Mehdi, a few words about yourself.
Hello again, my name is Mehdi. I'm the founder and CEO of Elias, part of DAPSI project Cohort 1. And at Elias, we develop tools to help developers to be able to know exactly what to do with personal data, especially when they have to give it back to a user or make it portable between two companies.
Thank you. Matthias? I think Matthias is still maybe not here, right? Okay. Vivi, please.
Hi, really, really great to be here and lovely hearing all these presentations so far. My name is Vivi Lahtenoja. I'm the chair of the board for My Data Global, which is a nonprofit association based in Helsinki in Finland for the promotion of human-centric approaches to personal data. Thanks.
Thanks for being here. Zoltan is not here yet, right? Okay. I guess not. Okay, then let's start the roundtable. I mean, yeah, as you said, there was very nice presentations, and I would like to start with the first topic. So in the context of data and service portability, the implementation of new governance is proposed as a solution now with all the privacy and, okay, so Matthias is here. I hope someone is admitting him. And so yeah, this new governance is proposed as a solution with all this data privacy and data portability issues. The old governance does not work. And there are different possibilities that have been discussed that how this governance structure could be designed in future. I see a raised hand, but please just let me finish this sentence. And like, for example, one of the solution is that, yeah, we should have a neutral structure. Like it means what neutral means is like without any economic interest in connection with the management of the system. That this neutrality provides and builds trust and transparency and ensures independence from large market dominating companies. So as you all here presented your open source project and have been working on your so like a few open source services, my question would be, how do you think your open source efforts can help to move toward this new governance model? Okay, then we will start again. I would suggest one by one. Zoltan is not here yet, or? No. Okay. So let's move with like based on my list. Aaron, but please also keep in mind, like for every question, 2-3 minutes maximum. Yeah, I know it's very short, but we have a lot of speakers, so we want to know all your. Zoltan also just joined. Welcome, Zoltan. We just started the session. And Aaron, please start this roundtable.
Okay, so oh, I hear my voice. I'm echoing a little bit. Okay, that's good now. So because I work with cryptography, I think a lot of people like that tends to get associated with decentralization. But I'm actually pretty pessimistic about the approach to try and decentralize things. So part of that is like if you just look at history, so one of the earliest, I mean, there were lots of decentralized systems early in the internet, going back, I mean, trying to stay fairly recent with torrents in like the early 2000s. By sharing everything in a peer-to-peer way, then like there's benefits to that. There's lots of systems that try to do similar things, but it's hard to be decentralized and open and interoperate with lots of other independent service providers without also exposing the data to people who have different reasons for wanting to access that data. So again, in the case of torrents, you have people sharing data, and it's not hard for somebody to go and join the same network where everybody else is sharing and just see what everybody else is sharing and to analyze it. And there were lots of legal challenges based around that. But now in the case of decentralized social media, which I prefer to Twitter, it's like I use Mastodon, I use things like that. There's lots of good options, but it's not a silver bullet. We still have to be aware that if the data is effectively public, there are going to be people that go and crawl that data who analyze it in the same way that Twitter analyzes social data usage, but it's going to be harder to detect because it's like there's no one place where all the data is stored. It's all over the place. And it's actually made it easier for people to do that because now the hosting costs are offloaded onto the public rather than Twitter itself. So they get almost all the benefits of the data being there, being able to analyze it, but they have fewer costs. I guess the downside for them is other people can also analyze it. So it opens up the market, but it has downsides. So we can't treat it as a silver bullet. And that's probably my 3 minutes, I guess.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's why this personal pod, solid pod, like came as a solution that that everyone has control over their own personal data. But yeah, I also see your point here. Okay, Merlin, what's your opinion?
Well, I'd like to react maybe because I think I mostly agree with Aaron, but I do want to note that if you are talking about Mastodon and other services where they're decentralized as opposed to Twitter, the whole thing about data mining is a big power shift, right? Because Twitter has way more data at their disposal than we can ever see or crawl. They know exactly when you're active, when you're viewing things, and that's all stuff that other users can't see. So I think it does mean that they have less power over the users, and they have less access to data than they would normally have. Like if they host everything centralized, they could see a lot more. They could, quote, spy, unquote, a lot more. And yes, the data is maybe more public, but I would argue that everyone being able to crawl as opposed to just a few is probably a better thing. And then as to the question itself, I guess a pretty generic answer would be that in general, if you have open standards and open source implementations of those standards really help others build applications to interoperate with the protocols, right? So that will be a huge help in general. Whether or not decentralization will be the complete solution to breaking free, so to say. But if you want a very practical example for MMLS as a smartphone operating system, what we would really like to do is support also decentralized protocols, because that's what most of the end users want, right? They want to use WhatsApp to talk with people. And that's insanely not possible. Sorry, go ahead.
You think your service is considered as neutral then? Yeah,
I think so. But so the problem is that the companies, they just shield off all their data, and actually Twitter is relatively open in the sense that they have some API, right? And they were more open before. But companies like WhatsApp, they make it incredibly hard to make your own client for them. And we've done that in the past, and they banned my number, and then I could no longer use it, right? So I think some decentralization and standardization and open source implementations of protocols would make the world a better place, at least in some regards.
Okay, great. Thank you. Nicola?
Yeah. So I think that when discussing governance models, I think the best way to predict how sustainable or the livelihood of a new governance model is to consider how well it matches the interests and incentives of individuals that are supposed to use it, and maybe also just even compare it to successful governance models outside the digital realm. So I think a good example is the legal system that in general we have today in the world, which comprises enforceable laws that are based on some social norms there. So they're mostly not out of the blue, they're based on social norms, and that are in turn based on some more or less universally accepted principles in any given society or country. So let's say, bringing it back to the digital realm, if one such principle would be that data should not be amassed by an oligopoly of market dominating companies, then open source projects have a chance to compete with these market dominating companies without being overwhelmed out of from the onset. And then the next step to that is for them to actually compete successfully. And to do that, they need to implement extreme usability and user friendliness in their solutions in order to make it much more attractive, make their solution much more attractive and generate uptake. Because of course we can discuss about and theorize about the different models, the decentralized models that would be good, but I've personally tried many many solutions that that help preserve privacy, and I realized that, let's say, my grandma wouldn't be able to use them. So I think extreme usability would help better uptake of these privacy preserving solutions, and hence better data governance.
Thanks for your honest answer. Okay, so Mikael, what is your opinion?
Thanks. To actually raise discussion, I disagree with Aaron. So I strongly believe in distributed model. And for me, that means that yes, my data can be distributed across different services. My data from my continuous glucose monitor can be in the cloud service of that vendor. Data from my insulin pump can go to the cloud service of that vendor. And then I have plenty of other wellness trackers, and I keep that data all distributed in different cloud services, as opposed to collecting all data in one place that would become a major honeypot. So in that way, I see big promise in decentralized architecture for this health data, and me wanting to control where I store it and how I manage it. And there, I think interoperability is key. And here we help in this DAPSI project by building an open source and open standard based on HL7 FHIR for this diabetes data. And we publish it, and not just publish it in our own GitHub repo, we actually bring it as an official example into the official standard. So I do believe in the decentralized part. I also believe in transparency and governance. I think those are hugely important. And here we help by building integrations to any of the consent management solutions or personal health data stores that we can find. And that's also according to our mission, so people can really select where their data is stored, and they can actually see who has accessed what data when and based on which permission. Regarding Najime's overall question, one thing I don't agree with is the no business incentive, or what is it, without economic interest. And in our case, I think it's really essential that we build our business case, our whole business case, on top of the data and on top of data sharing, and then include trust there. So we are only able to share the data when people using our service actually trust us. And if we ever lose that trust, then our full business model erodes, and that destroys us as a company. So in that way, I think that it's really important for us to have an economic interest, and that helps us maintain the trusted relationship with people.
We can definitely discuss this in this third topic for the business model, but from end user perspective, it shouldn't like the economic interest of the provider should not be a priority. That's what I meant. But let's discuss it in the third topic then. Mehdi, please go on.
About open source, right?
Yes, the first question about the new governance model and how the open source project can help.
No, of course, the thing open source, the way it's delivered as free software, is the promise that it will be at least always owned by the people who have it, be able to modify. You know, I think we all know here the open source and free software principles, and I think when there is already so many investment that needs to be made on the culture, on the education, on the pedagogy, on so many stuff, if we had also to compete on the software, on the standards, on the interoperability mechanism, that would make also, again, more expenses, more money to be able to finally do and achieve what we want to do, is like a society where people at least control their data, maybe on their own pod, maybe distributed, but at least they understand what's going on. And the thing is, with open source, let's say we can remove, it's not done yet, but we can remove a financial aspect, a technical barrier for people and companies or nonprofit to be able to own the technology's development, be able to modify versus and focus on education, focus on pedagogy, on user experience, with or without incentives. I personally believe we need personal incentives to have group movements. So you need to have the personal incentive and the group incentive to transform a lone activist into a full movement in a society. So yeah, and we will be able to have the two. There are so many valuable data. My stars on Airbnb, I want them to have on another a platform or whatever, my reputation. So there are many things that can drive me into that. So yes, for me, at least what on our side, we build open source tools, it's to remove that aspect, so we focus on pedagogy. And I will just finish by saying, we need the user, we need the policymakers, we need the developers. The developers will be the one building the software and building the software on top of the open source software to finally build the end user application. So if we do also pedagogy and we give tooling to the developers, the builders of this new economy, the new society we want, yes, this is how we will be able to win on a bottom-up approach. So decentralization, yes, but with the one who are doing it. And as long as they will have more incentives or more moral, legal ethics to not do it and continue to work for companies who don't have these models, it will be really hard. It will be just a wish versus a real practice, a real change. So the user, the developers, the policymakers are important, and open source at least can remove the technical and the financial aspect, financial investment into on the tech. So we focus on pedagogy. This is why at least we participate to the open source movement.
Okay, thank you. Matthias, what's your opinion?
Yeah, so completely agree with what Michael and Mehdi just said. I think we all agree on this kind of distributed human-centric data network. People will have, if we take the Data Governance Act, people will have data intermediaries to, and organizations will have data intermediaries to manage these data exchanges. So now the question is, how do we prevent another kind of monopoly or centralization on one particular data intermediary, right? Because if everybody depends on the data intermediary, then you have the same problem again, even though the network is distributed. So Visions, for instance, we provide a data intermediary service, but what we believe in is that those data intermediaries will rely on what we call digital commons, which are as well software than specifications. And then you have these open source building blocks on contract, on consent, on interoperability that respect a set of accepted specifications. And so any data intermediary can package those and do their own business model and do their own approach. But since they all rely at least on the same specifications, maybe even on the same software building blocks, then there is interoperability between all data intermediaries, and you can easily change from one to the other. So right now, concretely, my opinion is that Gaia-X, so everybody I think knows Gaia-X, Gaia-X is working on these specifications, and projects like DAPSI are building this kind of open source building blocks that allow to implement the specifications. And for instance, we have for our skills domain created a nonprofit that is called Prometheus, and whose job is to fund and govern those digital commons. So our DAPSI project is, for instance, the digital common on the consent and contract management for that ecosystem, and we do it in the context of Gaia-X. So I think there are different layers. The lower one is the specifications. On top of that, you have open source building blocks. And then you have the organizations that package it. And through that, you can, it's a no-brainer that you need open source to guarantee this openness. And through that, you can guarantee interoperability between the different data intermediaries. And then the big question today, and that we can cover in the last question, is how do you fund those digital commons so that it's maintained and it evolves with time, and you have a good set of digital commons to implement your network.
Okay, thank you. Vivi.
Yeah, thanks for the question. It was really thought-provoking for me, and and it's not always like super clear what the kind of new governance that's being proposed as a solution really means. So I was really interested by kind of the definition that you gave, that this means a decentralized system of data storage by individuals, which would be combined with this neutral structure without economic interest in the management of the system. So there are good and real questions to be asked about both of those features. Like, should data storage always or even by default be decentralized and individualized, like it's been pointed out already earlier? I'd like to expand on that by just pointing out that there are people out there without access to data storage devices or skills to use them. And then the point about governance structure being without economic interest in the system it governs, I'd like to just point out that non-commercial parties like governments and nonprofit organizations and such, they also need funds. And also they are perceived in large parts of the world as incompetent, as well as incredibly prone to corruption. So there are ways to argue for specifically commercial entities to be the governing function. So I don't really claim to have answers to all those questions, but I think it's valuable to raise them and to ask them. And then to kind of address the question about open source projects and the progress towards these better new forms of governance, I had two ideas. So one is the very basic point that the open movement and organizations like Open Knowledge International, the Linux Foundation, and so on, they're doing invaluable work in promoting the idea of openness as a kind of foundation for societal and planetary well-being as well. So like the organization that I chair, My Data Global, was actually spun off from a working group in the Finnish chapter of Open Knowledge. And one of the three key goals of My Data is the promotion of open ecosystems. So just like by virtue of engaging with the open movement and contributing to open source projects, I think is a valuable and worthwhile thing to do, and absolutely needs to be kept up just for that intrinsic value. And then the second kind of recommendation that I would have for open source projects is that focus on developing low and no code solutions. Like the vast majority of people in the world are not coders, nor should they have to become coders in order to fully participate and benefit from the data and service ecosystems globally. So equipping all people with the means to actually use, to participate and engage, I think that should be the cornerstone of any form of kind of new good governance. So thanks.
Great, thanks for your answer. Zoltan, before answering the question, please also briefly introduce yourself, because when we were introducing you were not here. And then I hope that you get my email and then answer my question.
Yes, sure. Thank you very much. My name is Zoltan. I work as an associate professor at the University of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. I work mainly in the security and privacy field. And here I am representing a task force of the BDVA, the Big Data Value Association, namely the task force on data protection. Regarding the questions, or the first question, it's difficult because so much has already been said. But there are 2 points that I would like to add. The first point is that the question was about open source and governance. And I believe that open source is great in terms of transparency, in terms of trustworthiness. But I don't think that it solves governance issues. So we should not believe that by employing open source software, open source systems, we would automatically have a good governance. I mean, there are so many other things that we need in terms of processes, in terms of business models, in terms of policy enforcement, etc., etc. So it's a much more complicated problem. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is regarding distributed data storage. I think that's great from a privacy point of view, or it can be. Depending on how it is implemented, it could be great from a privacy point of view, but it can be very challenging in terms of security. So I can imagine people's devices being hacked, people losing their devices, forgetting their passwords, etc., etc. So that has its own challenges that also needs to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, you're the last one, but I'm just going through my list. So, okay. Thanks. Yeah, I think we had really nice answers. And then let's go to the second one, which is also very related to the first one. So, well, we know that we, like in the interoperability issue, we always work with the common data format and common standards. And what, like, a lot of our DAPC teams worked, and some of them also developed common format for different services and for data transfer. And yeah, I mean, but sometimes when you move between different services, because of the difference in these services, you don't have all these data formats in the destination service. So, for example, let's say you are moving from one like photograph provider to the other one, and in one of them you have like tagging capabilities, and in destination you don't have this tagging capabilities. So, well, I would like to ask two questions. First, do you have in mind some a specific domain that you think that a common data format should still need to be developed? And second, related to this topic, what are the challenges of implementing and developing such common data format and standards? Aaron, we will start again with you.
Okay, so I'm very lucky, I think, in that I work primarily with documents, like established document formats. So in a lot of cases, we don't need to do anything to create new formats. We just need to make sure that things work as is. And with our project, our DAPC project, our challenge was just getting it to run in the browser, because the libraries aren't meant to run in the browser. But yeah, I think the bigger thing, like for the work that we do, is more when new formats come out, that the services that people use, they don't have a strong incentive to make them interoperable. Like so, like with Google, you have the big ones, and they interoperate with Microsoft, because that's why people want to use Google, because they can interoperate with Microsoft. But they have new services that yeah, anytime there's a new format, they have no reason to want to interoperate with people. So I think that's where the big challenge lies, that there needs to be top-down pressure, I think, like from the EU, and there is that pressure, but it probably needs to be stronger to say that if you're letting people put all this data in, they need a way to get it out. And I think, again, those systems, they exist, but there needs to be stronger enforcement of it. We need to give larger fines more frequently, which are to the extent of the GDPR, because I think the fines that have been given out have been pretty soft, and in most cases it's far less than the profit that was accrued in the meantime. So really, it's a slap on the wrist, and they still make money, and they'll just take the fine and consider it a cost of doing business. So we need to really make that much stronger. And yeah, I think at least in my part of the industry, the formats aren't the hard part. It's the game theory, like the economics, the politics, all of that. So yeah, I think, and also yeah, there was the point about the pedagogy, like educating people, making sure that when there are when politicians do engage with these things, when there are fines and new proposals, that people are educated enough about these issues to pressure politicians to go after those big players who are abusing them. So I think that's all I can say on it. Yeah.
Thank you. Merlin, what's your opinion?
My background is mostly software engineering, and I haven't had to develop a lot of formats myself. I think my take for the challenges of making a new format is that you really need to consider all the different features that you need, everything that you want to store in there. You started with your example of photos with, tags, social tags in there, and JPEGs and some other files do support some arbitrary text in photos and some location data, but if you export it to another format that doesn't contain all of this, then that goes away, right? So the question is, how can you make a format that somehow contains all the data that people want at the time, but in the future they might want more? So if you start adding everything, it becomes an extremely complicated format, and then the next problem is that everyone will actually have to implement it. So that is always a big challenge, and I think typically the way to solve that is to make a lot of it extensible, so that you can retrofit certain things and make them optional. Of course, that doesn't mean you always get all your data, but at least it means that writing basic support for a format from a software engineering perspective is easier, and then you can look at adding things on top. I think the XMPP protocol for chatting is a pretty good one, although it's a protocol, not a file format. And then, of course, I guess going back to open source, if there's implementations to read and write all these different formats, that makes a big difference, right? Because if Microsoft has a extensible document format that is somewhat documented, but there's nothing that actually reads it other than their program, it's worthless to most people because they can only read it with Microsoft's program. And of course, LibreOffice and other people have tried to solve that problem, and there are more open standards now. But my point is that, yes, you really need a good open source software as well to be able to work with the formats. Otherwise, just having a standard doesn't help. But that's it from my software engineering perspective.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, if everyone wants to implement and develop their own format, then still, again, we will have the same problem. So, Nicola.
Yeah, I support Marlene's idea there, but it's a very fine balance between having a format that is, let's say, open enough for innovation and new extensions, and at the same time interoperable, because we do need to leave enough room for innovations. Otherwise, imagine we'll be stuck with GIFs, which were initially conceived as a graphical interchange format and would be the format for images. That would be pretty a funny world, let's say. So we need to keep this enough room for innovations for whatever will come in the future, because we simply cannot imagine the future. And the further it goes, the more solutions there will be. And when it comes to the question about domains, I think a high priority domain that I keep saying is the healthcare and life sciences, because this is something that gets a lot of attention, and it's something that a lot of people struggle with, especially, let's say, even in the European Union, from different countries. You have different formats of like expressing I don't know, healthcare data. These are mostly driven by vendors, and they're oftentimes absolutely incompatible. And luckily here, for the, let's say, for the developer community, there's the ground truth. There's the human body, which is kind of like has the same set of genes. Genes are different, combinations are different, but the same number of genes. So this could be a good baseline for developers to work and work on better, for like a better format for an interchangeable format for healthcare data. And that will make life for a lot of people moving from country to country easier.
So for like currently, there is no common format for healthcare.
It's a complete mess. I've had this experience in Sweden. Every region is using different vendors for medical journaling systems. And oftentimes there's incompatibility even within the same country, not to speak about on the level of the European Union or further still.
Okay.
And so I think the healthcare domain is receiving a lot of attention, and I think it's a good direction to go.
But are they like the worker in this domain? Are they towards implementing this common data format or not yet? At least
I think yes, they are very much towards the issue that I see is that it's very vendor driven. So there are these large multinational companies that usually provide these very, very complex, very expensive solutions that take a lot of time to integrate. But once the solutions are integrated, well, it's really hard to change anything because they are also proprietary and very closed. So the professionals in this area, they would gladly like to have this more open and more interoperable, but they usually don't have much say. So I think this is an area that needs to get more attention and needs some improvement.
Thank you. Very interesting. Mikhail?
Yes, thanks. I would not say we are in such a bad phase with healthcare data. So I consider myself an expert there. We are not as lucky as Aaron, for instance. It's not as well documented as document formats, but still there are better ground truths than just the human body. There is the HL7 standard setting organization, and HL7 standards are now in their third generation, and especially HL7 Fire getting a lot of attention, and all the big EHR vendor, electronic health record system vendors, are already mapping everything that they do to Fire API, so you can actually transfer data according to those standard APIs. There are a couple of others. There's Open EHR that is more internal to the systems. How do you actually store the data in a database? And then there's OMAP that is for secondary use and research. So I would say in healthcare, the structures are there and we know how to map data. And the most common stuff has been mapped already. And now where SensorTrend, for instance, contributes is we take diabetes data and we build HL7 Fire resource models for that diabetes data, and then we publish that. So I agree, it is an area that requires focus and where it should work, but I am not so pessimistic. I think the rules are there, guidelines are there. It's quite easy now to work in that space. There are good enough steps that you should take when you do that. So as I mentioned, we map the data from these diabetes devices into the HL7 standard.
Merlin has a question.
Yeah, I've actually done a lot of stuff with medical records in my past job, and I was learning about HL7 specifically. It doesn't really help so much with the decentralization aspect, right? Because in the Netherlands, pretty much everything is stored in a central place called the LSP. And they will give you access to the format one way or another. But typically what I've seen happen is there's a couple of general practitioner companies that offer services for general practitioners, for doctors. But then they are supposed to send data every night to a central system that then gives things in HL7 format because the companies themselves find the standard too complicated. I'm not sure if you have anything to say about that, but
well, sure. That I would say that's a political decision whether you then store all the data centrally. And I know, for instance, your MedMy system is thought of to be a decentralized system. So the way it was originally pitched to me was that where in Finland we have one centralized personal health record system and one centralized medical record system where everybody needs to push data, in the Netherlands you would have several, and you as a consumer would select that, yes, I want this provider to keep all my data, and then everybody should store their data into that provider. So it would be decentralized. Not sure how well that has taken off, but that was at least the vision when they started.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on. Mehdi, are you here?
Yes, of course. Of course.
Okay, please.
Now, yes, about standards and how we can agree on how we transfer data and stuff. So there have been a lot of things there, and especially so just as a part, I run API Days conferences. It's a series of conferences on APIs. So how do we make data portability, right? Because what we forget is that, and this is the point I wanted to say, we have enormous data portability. Actually, it's working at scale and we don't see it, but it's on per company agreements. You know, it's company that impose data format, as you said, that impose this term of services and then sharing data with others. So we are in an era of de facto standards. We can see platforms like Facebook, Google, and so many others. They decide how we transfer data. They decide the terms, and even the law, GDPR, CPA, whatever. We have the Access Act in the US that push for interoperability, did not, let's say, impose them a way that's, let's say, user-friendly and that works. So unfortunately, the time the open source communities, and again, it's not applied, it does not apply to all, but for at least for the last 10 years, we've seen that the time we spend to create standards sometimes is too long about the design and not about the implementation, the use, and the scale. This is why some companies who have a large user base are able to impose their de facto standards, which are not standards in an open way, but that, you know, I just take the example of the authorization standard, OAuth. Like we had a spec, we had a spec people agreed on, but people, because some top companies were pushing another type of the spec, developers were considering these were the standards and not the official standards that actually bring a lot of mess. So yeah, and so today, let's say it's really hard to have an answer, but understanding that we can build standards for good, which are open, which are contributive, with contributors and with an open governance, but we need to be sure we're not overtaken or overridden by a company who would push a standard with a dictatorial governance based on their traction, and that would take the leadership, and then embrace the developers, the people on these de facto standards. And you know, sometimes we say design by committee. We should accept standards to be respect the open close principle, like open for modification, but closed for open for adding stuff, but closed for modification, and release pieces of standard early and track for adoption. Now, with the web, Tim Berners-Lee, we didn't have so many users when we create the first standards, but now we need the users with us when we develop standards. And HL7, FHIR standard for healthcare, you know, is adopted and more and stuff like that. Open banking standards, you know, has been pushed by regulation. Again, but it's not as widely adopted as we wanted. But for have user-driven, fair user-driven standard, we need to focus on the adoption early, and the DAPC project was to enable to raise this project. But again, I just want to say that contrary to before, the market is too big. We need to have the user early and the first contributor early in the standard adoption, unless it will be overridden or overtaken by a big player that will come and say, oh, I think this is the standard. And they will push, announcing at WWDC conference by Apple or Google I/O, whatever, and like killing so many hours of work, of discussion, of contribution. So yeah, let's have the user with us when we drafted the first version of standards.
Okay, thank you. Matthias.
Yes, so on that, and to make it a bit more clear, just if I can, just to show a quick example of these different layers, and it ties to this interoperability discussion and to what everything was said right now. So it's in French, but here are the kind of organizations that hold the data. They want to connect and share data to the same network. They will choose their data intermediary. And these data intermediaries can rely on same building blocks, and these building blocks that are open source rely also on open specifications and standards. And so what this allows is, for instance, here at this level, we decide how the consent protocol works, or how the consent data model is specified. And so if a user gives a consent from this organization to share data with this organization, well, then through the different data intermediaries, there is interoperability thanks to this standard kind of specification. We work in the skills domain where you have a lot of different skills ontologies, even in the same domain, even in like digital skills. You have hundreds of skills ontologies in Europe. You have also a lot of different ways on how to describe a skill profile. How do you describe a CV? And you have some international standards that are not covered, that does not cover all, or that are used only by some kind of actors and other kind of actors using others. So at this level here in this Gaia X group, we define the specification and, for instance, how are learning traces described. And it's not to reinvent the wheel. For instance, what was validated is to use XAPI, which is a global standard. But then all of these organizations here do not have described their learning traces in that format. So here what we're working on is a kind of automatic or semi-automatic translators so that you can easily map to and from that specification. And I think that can help in the interoperability. You need the common spec, but you need also the software that allows you to easily translate it. And since this is open source and commonly governed, well, then you can guarantee that that kind of a democratic process. And then I completely agree with what Mehdi said, that today, especially in a winner-takes-all kind of approach, we need the standard to be the winner that takes it all, and it needs to start from here on great use cases that will onboard organizations and people onto that whole system. And I would say in the end, if we talk about the skills data space and you connect every kind of school, university, edtech app to a same data network, following these principles, well, then a player like LinkedIn, if you do it on a large enough scale, a player like LinkedIn is more or less obligated to connect to the network in order to stay relevant, to have access to the right data about people, to be able to have personalized services. And then you can say to LinkedIn, okay, to connect to the network, these are the rules, these are the specifications, this is how you need to format, in a sense, your API.
Okay, thank you. Vivi.
Thanks. Yeah. So this is another excellent question, and I thought I would take it into a bit of a more philosophical direction than a technical one, because like one of the challenges in developing common and interoperable data formats is precisely deciding on what to focus on first and getting others to agree with you and to join in the work and eventually adopt and use. So like the Commission has, for example, published lists of services that are essential and important in connection with the cybersecurity legislation that's being updated in NIS2. So one way to approach this question of like, okay, so what should we focus on is to refer to things like, you know, lists of essential and critical services and prioritize standardization efforts for common formats in those services. But these lists are open to some justified criticism in terms of inclusion, and not just what services are included as essential or important and which are not, which are excluded from these lists, but also in terms of like who was invited to join in the definition process, right? So who gets to decide what's critical, what's important? And it can be argued that a more diverse set of contributors would have come up with a different list of essential and important services that would more accurately maybe reflect the lived experience of importance in the European population. So like, well, I understand that like healthcare and life sciences are something that touch all of us as human beings. It's still a huge domain, right? So like just deciding on what's important there, is it things like treating menstrual pain, or is it treating things like type 1 diabetes, or what is it? Like these are value loaded questions. So I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that like when we do make the decisions on what services to prioritize for standardization, is just ask around widely as we are right now, just, collecting opinions of like what is it that should be focused on. And like from my personal point of view, like one of the key things that we need to look at is consent. So however you feel about consent as a legal or philosophical approach to personal data, like it is the law of the land right now here in the European Union. So figuring out how to manage interoperable and dynamic consents is applicable across sectors and would be high up on my list of priorities for looking at.
Great, thanks for a very, very nice philosophical view. That was new to us. I think for technical people, that was new a bit. Zoltan.
I'd like to return to the technology field. So the question was about common data formats, and I think common data formats are very important, but just the first step, because what we ultimately want to achieve is data portability, and there is this idea that I, as a user, as a data subject, can extract my data from service provider A and then move it to service provider B. And I think this is just not what would work. So it just doesn't match reality, because what typically happens is that my data or data about me within a service provider A gets entangled with all other types of data, with data that is non-personal, or data that is about other data subjects. So, for example, if the service provider creates some kind of analytics, machine learning models, whatever, using different types of data, then it will be very, very difficult to disentangle these data and then identify what is really the set of data that belongs to me or that describes me, that I am entitled to actually extract and move to another service provider. So I think the toughest problems are not on the syntactical level, but more on the semantical level, and I think we are not there yet. So I think there's a long process ahead of us until we can really achieve that. Thank you.
Okay, then let's also keep you as the speaker, because because you were the last one for the other two. Let's have you as the first speaker for the last topic. So my last topic is about a business model, because like when you talk about this data portability and giving back control, giving the citizen control over the data, some people really believe that we lack a business model here. And they say that the most popular one for now is, for example, this big social media that are combined with ad brokers, which have the interest of the service provider on top. So my question would be, how can open source project and like basically whatever you have done in DAPC and in similar project help to define more transparent models where citizens make an informed choice over how their data is being used? So Zoltan, please you start, and then we will go down to top.
Okay. So I cannot really comment on business models. I'm a researcher, and I leave that to the other people in this virtual room who have more experience with that. What I would like to comment on is this idea of citizens making informed choices, because this is something that I do have some research on, and this research shows that this doesn't really work. And I think we all know that when we are asked to accept cookies, then we just accept the cookies, and nobody really takes the time to read what that would mean. And especially what that will mean for the future. So that sounds very, very good to let the data subjects make that decision, and we try to enforce that. So the legislation stipulates that the data controllers have to inform the data subjects in concise and easily understandable language. But this is simply not happening. So although there are efforts that go into this direction, it's not happening. So I think the real challenge is how to regulate this this field in such a way that ultimately the interests of the data subjects are kind of automatically catered for without them having to understand what all this means. I mean, obviously some people can understand that, and it's great if they can really make informed decisions, but I think most of the population will not do that, will not want to do that. So that's it from my side.
Thank you. Vivi.
Thanks. Yeah, this question about business models is a really, really important one. So in my data, we have this conceptual tool that we use a lot, which is the BLT sandwich, which is when we talk about the business, legal, technical, and societal perspectives on looking at data ecosystems. And so just to use that, the technologies for fair data ecosystems, such as privacy enhancing technologies, they exist and they're developing all the time. The legislation is beginning to be in place. The GDPR is here. We have the DGA, we have the Data Act coming up as well. And the societal problems of the current models, like threats to democracy and sheer human suffering that's is the consequence of the current model, they're patently clear. But what's missing is precisely the business models that are both supported by and conducive for these fair data ecosystems. So I don't really have an answer or a solution for how to fix this, but I will point you towards the My Data operators, including SensorTrend and Visions, who are here today, who are companies who are working on cracking specifically this issue. So I mean, there's work being done, but there's some way ahead still.
Yeah, as I said, some people say this is the most important aspect of all this topic. Okay, Matthias, what's your opinion?
Yeah, I agree. It's the most important. It's tied to the adoption and the value, and that's what makes the whole infrastructure scale. Then, as Vivi, I don't have a precise answer. I think nobody really does. I'd like just to state a bit the problem how I see it is that today, on the economic part, we are mined by those big platforms for our data. That is then used by predictive algorithms to predict our future, in a sense. Who are we going to vote for? Are we likely to buy a car or a trip to Italy or whatever? And then those predictions are sold to the highest bidder to sell their products. I think the personalization, the precise personalized recommendations that we get, we're not going to stop having those precise recommendations. Where I think the problem lies is that there is an asymmetry in information between those big platforms that know the future, in a sense, and us that don't know at all. They know before us who we're going to vote for. So I guess it's there. It's how this prediction about you can come back to you before being sold to the market, right? And you can say, yes, I want to become a doctor, or I want to go to Italy, or I'm interested in that topic, and that can then be sold to the market. Then the point of Zoltan of saying, will that be too complicated for a person to understand? I think this can be solved through UX and through a good value proposition. On your kind of, if it's a system in our domain that predicts what kind of job, what kind of career you should get, I think people would be interested in that and to give some thought to it. Because today cookies, we don't know the difference for us if we accept or not the cookie, right? So it has no real value for us to accept it or not. But on something like your career path or your health diagnosis, I think people will put a bit more time into it. But then on the actual business model of it all, I think we should incentivize people to start controlling their data and maybe get some share of the revenue that the data generate. And I think through that revenue and through that incentivization, they could themselves pay the AIs to work for them and not work for the companies. So I think there is a model there, but the big thing is can we find a business model that is more lucrative than the advertising and predictive business model? Because this model is so lucrative that it powers these big AIs and it powers all the free services we have. So if we want to replace it, we need to find something that's more lucrative. Otherwise, it won't be adopted by the companies or by the people.
Thank you for your comprehensive answer. Mehdi, what's your opinion?
Yeah, sorry, I missed there is a disconnection issue on my side.
You missed the question?
Yeah, just the few elements of the question.
And so what are the new business model that like they have that the end user have more control over their data rather than, for example, this business model of the big social media that are combined with ad brokers and they have the interest of the service provider. They don't care about the end user interest at all.
Yeah, I would not say they don't care. They care at some point to renew their business. So at least they care at some point. They care at some point. They care in their own pattern, right? And in their own model that they can impose, as we said on question 2. No, most of the models that mostly for open systems where we can't capture value because everything is open, closed, interoperable with open standard and open governance. In my opinion, the only models that are possible are, let's say, the infrastructure models, where people pay to own their part, to own their pod or their servers or their wallets or their or whatever. At least they pay something. They pay to be able to let's say to make it happen, to pay the people doing the work, and you will pay more. You will pay more depending on the number of service they do to you, right? Like a bank, right? We pay a bank because they kind of secure our money and enable to do stuff like that. So yeah, first business model, really developer oriented. You pay the server, you pay the infrastructure, right? So a few bucks a month, and then you will go upper and upper with more advanced application where you will pay because they deliver more service of interoperability of operations. And again, user will be able to move from one to the other, right? Like competition, like today with banks, right? We can move our money, but so I believe in a business model like that where we will go with higher and higher in value, but always keeping the system quite open, right? Keeping the system quite open. And the openness can be controlled by regulators to say, look, you are obliged to allow someone to move from a service to another, like that. And yes, and so we will add more value with more services, but in an open way. The example of wallets, in the crypto world can be that. So at some point, someone is managing your wallet with specific services, experiences, and at the end you pay a certain amount, fees, whatever, but you pay more with for people who do more for you, but you can change at any time, you can move at any time and everything. So I believe in this type of business models. Yes, because open source business model is a difficult discussion, but when you can't capture value, then you are an infrastructure. You have what we call a no gatekeeper policy. So anything can be anywhere, but then you have to pay for the bits and the atoms that at least you're building.
Thank you. We are a bit behind the schedule. Mikael.
Right, I try to hurry this up. So Zoltan mentioned cookies, and we just accept the cookies. I think there are two important solutions we need there. One is we should have just a simple label explaining, okay, what are the terms and conditions of this service, rather than having to read through dozens of pages of terms and conditions or privacy clauses. So I'm looking forward to, let's say, fair data label that would be comparable to fair trade or organic production, something that you can just glance at, or similar to, let's say, copyleft licenses or Creative Commons licenses. So you know that, okay, when you combine these two labels, this is what's actually in the terms. You don't need to read those. The other that I really want to see happening, I think Mehdi also referred to those, is the consent management apps. So each time you say yes to a consent, you should get a consent receipt, and you store that to your app, and then you can say, okay, these are the permissions I've given to different parties, and you can just swipe and remove those permissions. So those are the two developments I'd really like to see. And I'd also like you to see our business model. So this is how we think of these. People with chronic conditions have a high motivation to share their data, both with healthcare and with pharma. With healthcare to get better treatment and with pharma to get better treatments in the future. And both healthcare and pharma need the data to provide better care and to provide even better care in the future. And currently there's just no mechanism for me to submit my data to, for instance, an insulin manufacturer. Hey, please make better insulin for me. And I think that these healthcare apps, self-care apps are in a really good position here because they already have a trusted and ongoing discussion with the patient. So if an insulin manufacturer would like to get a sample data set from a population, they could ask from a group of health apps, okay, can we get your data? And since our users trust us, we say them, hey, Novo Nordisk would like to have your data from 6 months before you change to the new insulin and 6 months after this new insulin. And if they trust it, we give that to the insulin manufacturer and we get extract some value out of that. And this is what I presented really briefly. We want to see many apps here and citizens giving data to apps then giving them integrators. I believe there need to be integrators in between because all these apps are focused on serving their target population in the best possible way. And if they would need to build all the integrations to healthcare and negotiate all the businesses with pharma, that takes too much of an effort. But we have some integrators there that integrate with the apps and negotiate the data deals with pharma and healthcare. And then the compensation flows the other way. So that is really the business model I see emerging for SensorTrend. And regarding the data intermediaries, I'm still a bit puzzled of what is their business model there. I like Mehdi's thinking, okay, it should be like a bank, but a bank account is something in the modern society that you absolutely need. And I don't think that we're yet in the world that you absolutely need a data intermediary or a consent wallet. So there's still a bit push there.
Okay,
and
thank you.
Just one more thing regarding market dominance. I absolutely want SensorTrend to dominate the market of healthcare apps for people with type 1 diabetes who actually use these kind of wellness trackers. So I'm not opposing to market dominance in a small niche.
Thank you. Nicola, please give us a short answer.
Yes. So first of all, sure. I think open source projects can help define new transparent business models by also innovating business models. So what I see so far in this path, having started the startup, usually there are educations like these are the business models for open source. And I think open source projects should not only innovate technologically, but also innovate in terms of open source and think more about becoming enablers for new features and new applications. It's not enough to just implement an alternative to I don't know, Google Docs or something like that. They should also enable new features to be attractive to users. Otherwise, I think in many cases, users will not switch simply due to privacy concerns. And related to what other speakers mentioned about cookies and all these, I think it's quite clear that users are overwhelmed, and it's simply important to provide sound and safe defaults, and these should be defaults and they should be enforced. And unfortunately, the cookies just made it worse because the default is to just accept a bad choice. But I think better defaults should be a clear focus. Thank you.
Thank you for your short answer. Merlin, can you also give us a short answer?
Yeah, I think a very short answer is that where we can improve on some of these things where people have to figure out what data they want to share, what they not want to share, is we can provide some kind of templates. And those can be crowdsourced or created by experts or groups of people can work on that. And with cookies, it's either always essential or everything. but with healthcare, there's much more specialized advice that you could give. And in the Netherlands, we try to do this by having the doctor give the patient some options, like some default options and templates of this is what you can share 3 weeks of data or a month or 3 months, and they could actually customize that later on. So I think that's something where at least crowdsourcing could help, not so much open source applications. As far as business model goes, I think the ad-driven model and the prediction model is very toxic, and I don't see another solution other than paying for the stuff that you want to use. So I think what Matthias said, he already left, but the fact that we're not going to get rid of just sharing everything and that we just need to live with that and find something more lucrative, I don't think lucrative is necessarily the way to go. I think we need to go with regulation and figure out what makes sense, and if that means we need to fund certain things in the public interest through tax money and take some more tax money from companies, that's just a way of rerouting the money they give that they spend on ads that they give to Google, right? We can just invert that path somehow. That's my short answer.
Great. And Aaron, you're the last one.
Okay, so yeah, trying to make this fast, but I don't know, I have a lot of thoughts on the matter, but yeah, I think the place to start is to say that acknowledge that for a long time, advertising was not targeted like this. There was like a century of advertising without targeted surveillance, and so we need to realize that this is a new thing. The expansion of surveillance through this, before it used to be if you were the phone company, you could tap things, but like there needed to be targeted warrants on an individual level, and all the safeguards for that went away over decades. And yeah, like the present state of just putting out the guidelines and expecting corporations to follow them, to respect people's privacy, that's completely insufficient. And we wouldn't tolerate this from any other industry. So there are industries that have been legislated, like the automotive industry, safety, tobacco, like there are lists and lists of big industries where legislation has stepped in and said, this isn't okay, this absolutely needs to stop. And we, I think collectively it was more forceful. There was like less leeway given to companies saying, oh, well, they're a big part of the economy and we need to give them a timeline to figure this out, and we need to allow innovation to happen. We didn't say, innovation in tobacco, like generally we would treat it as a bad thing, but in data, for some reason, it's completely different. I think the problem here is that legislation, like lobbying, has expanded in a lot of places, and so that also needs to be dealt with, because in a lot of cases the legislation around technology is written by the technology companies because there's this idea that nobody else can understand it. And I think a part of that is that there isn't enough funding for independent researchers to go and poke holes in these things, to say that if you aggregate all this data in this one place, well, here's what you can do with that data, because people don't tend to understand the implications of like what data means. If you have this, like you can learn this about a person, and if you have this, you can learn that. But when you put them together, you learn a lot more. So aggregated data is like just much more harmful, and that isn't something that the average person will understand. You need like very dedicated researchers to figure it out. So I think keeping all of that in mind, that's not really, that's to say that we need more legislation. That doesn't really propose a business model. The best business model I can think of at the moment is co-ops, where you have, if you have one member, one vote, and if there were more of those, if everybody who owned a smartphone had a vote in how that smartphone was developed, you would see different smartphones, and same with social media platforms and things like that. So that's maybe a step in the right direction. And I think if we actually did the things to tear down the incumbents, the giants who are writing legislation that favors them, if we did that, then all those other business models would have a chance. Like the problem is that I don't think we need a new model. I think the existing models are sufficient, but we've allowed anti-competitive practices to overtake them. So, yeah.
Okay.
New isn't necessarily the answer. So.
Okay, thank you a lot. I think this was a very nice roundtable. Well, I myself learned a lot, and thank you for your very expert opinion talking about your experience. So I'm going to turn off my video because there should be also again a video showing here. I will also ask you to turn it off, and then I think then the session will end. So have a nice evening.
Thank you.